Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. There are no chairs, there are no tables, but don't be worried, there is an event coming on. We call this gallery, and this special format is designed to give the floor to 3 activists who are fighting for human rights and democracy all over the world. We have a Uyghur representative who lives in the US. We have somebody from Afghanistan, and we have somebody from Zimbabwe. So we really have the entire world. So my name is Ivana Števková, and I will introduce, in the name of the Board of Directors of the Forum 2000, the participants and the speakers. I would like to do it in alphabetical order. So first, we will have Mrs. Rushan Abbas. She is the founder and director of the Campaign for Uyghurs, based in Washington, D.C., and the general secretary of the Uyghur Academy in the US. Rushan was the vice president of Uyghur American Association for 2 terms, from 2000 to 2009, and a former reporter of the Radio Free Asia Uyghur service. Rushan started her advocacy work while she was a student participating in the pro-democracy demonstration at the Xinjiang University in the years 85 and 88. Mrs. Abbas received a Freedom Fighter 2019 award, so a fresh one, for her raising awareness of work for the current Uyghur crisis, and holds a degree from the Xinjiang University. So please, Rushan, the floor is yours, and please, you have 9 minutes to speak, and please be exact so we keep the time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so grateful to the Forum 2000 for the opportunity to speak for the millions of Uyghurs who are facing oppression in China today. Since Mao's occupation of East Turkestan in 1949, the Chinese government has been tried relentlessly to destroy Uyghur culture under the different labels. Since 9/11 tragedy in America, Communist authorities rebranded the efforts as a war on terrorism. Under that pretext, the entire region is branded. The cultural punishment has been cultural and collective. Hundreds of internment camps dotting the region hold an estimated 1 to 3 million Uyghurs today. They are going through thought transformation that aims to totally re-engineer my people and designed to force detainees to pledge allegiance to the Communist Party, renounce religious beliefs, discontinue the use of their mother language, and abandon their way of life. The detainees' children put into state-run orphanages. I decided to expose the atrocity and spoke at the think tank in Washington, D.C. on September 5th, 2018. 6 days after that, my sister, Dr. Gulshan Abbas, and my aunt, both were abducted by the Chinese government on the same day from 2 different cities. Unfortunately, my story is not unique. Chinese government harasses Uyghurs in diaspora with relatives back home, presenting them with a heartbreaking choice. Either keep silent about the horrific crisis and abuses, or let your family suffer the consequences. I'm choosing to speaking out. The persecution against the Uyghurs is racially motivated. The PRC's strategy of building a new Silk Road with Belt and Road Initiative is causing destruction in our homeland and populating massive concentration camps. According to numerous testimonies from the former detainees, the inmates are subject to mental and physical torture, intense indoctrination. They are subject to rape and forced to take unknown medications. China claims that these sprawling camps with barbed wire and the armed guard towers are vocational training centers. That is a lie. Detainees include medical doctors, professors, business people, academics, and entertainers, as well as young children and the elderly whom doesn't need job training. Racism and the cutting-edge technologies are being used in the combination to exert control over an entire nation. Chinese campaign of despotism extends far beyond the camps. Ubiquitous securities, like that George Orwell's 1984, a massive high-tech police state is the cruel reality for the entire region in West China. The streets are filled with cameras equipped with facial recognition, police checkpoints on every corner, GPS tracking devices on every vehicle, and QR scanning codes on every Uyghur homes. Chinese newspaper reported that 1.1 million Han Chinese cadres have deployed to live in Uyghur homes to monitor their daily lives. China's first concentration camp was built under the Strike Hard campaign in 2014. The size of the camps grew 465% in the last 20 months alone. According to the news accounts, Chinese government is building crematorias for a culture that doesn't believe in cremation. The last time the world saw crematorias and the concentration camps together, an outright Holocaust took place. What's happening in my homeland isn't staying there today. The model and the technology underpinning the mass repression in East Turkestan is already being rolled out more than a dozen countries to the world. China is changing the rule of law. The Western democracy and the values are at risk if the Chinese model of technological repression goes unchecked. In acute crisis situation like this one, we must look into the international bodies for support. Despite the horrendous atrocities the Uyghur people are facing today, we are confronted with a muted world. Is an entire ethnic group and vulnerable Uyghurs to become human collateral to short-term politics and the economy, or will we take a stand for the highest ideals of human dignity and freedom? Between trade threats, the power of Belt and Road Initiative, and the debt trap diplomacy and the manipulation in UN as the second largest donor, the communist China has become a power able to strong-arm the world. In Asian countries, in Muslim majority countries, Africa and some parts of Europe, the Chinese regime is bribing and leveraging some key politicians, media and the influential scholars and the important business people. With that, China has successfully silenced international criticism for its shameful human rights records. In their actions with those camps, PRC has managed to kill 4 birds in one stone. One, forcing millions of Uyghurs to go into slavery. The camps are modern-day slavery, forcing the Uyghurs to work on production today. 2, dislocating Uyghurs from their homes and the towns to reallocate Han Chinese settlers and open the land for the Belt and Road Initiative. 3, most of the Uyghur men are taken to the camps. Uyghur women and the girls are forced to marry Han Chinese. Neither the girls nor their families are able to reject such a marriage, a fear of repercussions. 4, lastly, Chinese government is orchestrating organ farms with those camps where millions are forced to undergo forced DNA tests and prepare them for slaughter. In July 2019, a joint statement signed by 24 most Western democratic countries issued to United Nations condemned China's Uyghur atrocity. As a response, 37 countries signed a letter expressed their support to China's abuses against the Uyghurs. These 37 countries later increased to 50. What if those countries supporting communist China was 100? What if it's 150? Will someone still stand for what's right? China spreading its communism, totalitarian ideologies, and its influences around the world. It threatens life and the liberty of all. This threatens democracy, freedom, and our future generations' interest. This challenges everything that we value. What do you think is going to happen if this continues unchecked? Many of you still remember the era of communism. For China, the communist ideal is coming back to life with Xi Jinping, and it's backed up with China's enormous economy. Communism means stepping out of freedom of expression and freedom of thought, freedom of religion and beliefs. Original thought and the beliefs are danger to the communist regime. Now this totalitarian ideology has returned to the world in full force. The individual freedom to choose what we believe, how we believe, and why we believe is one of the major achievements of the modern world. It defines our sense of liberty, of the freedom of conscience. Yet, now this foundation of our freedom is coming under attack. This disturbing trend is clearly visible in the persecution of Uyghurs and what's happening today in Hong Kong. Our struggle should be the concern of everyone who values the basic rights of dignity, respect, freedom, and the democracy. These rights are a fundamental part of the human legacy, our legacy, that's increasingly under attack from a new totalitarian regime. This is the return of communism through China's rise to power. It's becoming increasingly clear that the future will once again be decided by the competition between these two opposing political ideals. We are running out of time. We need your help and support so that together we can act with the compassion, courage, and the conviction that are necessary to fight against the evident evil. Thank you so much.
Roshan, thank you very much for your personal testimony. And now we go to Afghanistan. Please welcome Hamid Arsalan, who is currently serving at the Ministry of Interior of Afghanistan as the Stratcom Chief in Deputy Minister rank. Previously, Hamid was serving as a senior advisor to the National Security Advisor at the National Security Council. And before entering the public service, he worked at the National Endowment for Democracy for 8 years for the MENA region. So please, Hamid, the floor is yours for 9 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. So I prepared initially some remarks, but then when I looked around the room, most of you are young, so I thought it's better to share the personal stories. The stories that I'm sharing with you, they are related to the current job that I'm doing, but at the same time, some of my experiences in my previous job. So I begin with a story. In 2014, I was serving as an election observer in Afghanistan, in the west part of the country, and I got a call. I got a call that 11 individuals on their way to their district, to their village, because they voted and their fingers, it had the ink from participating in the elections. Their car was stopped and the Taliban chopped off their fingers because they participated in voting in the elections. Once I heard this story, so I immediately went to the hospital to meet with the victims. And there was one individual that caught my attention. He was probably in his mid-50s, white beard and a turban, and he was smiling. And for me, I thought that this guy must be crazy. He just lost a finger and he's smiling. So naturally, I approached him to go and talk to him. And he looked at me, and of course, I could feel the pain in him, but he put his hand on my shoulder, and he said, "Son, the Taliban chopped off one of my fingers, but I have 9 more to go vote 9 more times." He may be illiterate, you know, he may not even know what democracy is or what constitutional order is, but by his action, he was demonstrating and he was saying no to tyranny and terrorism, that is represented by the Taliban and their regional backers. And through that action, embracing democracy and constitutional order. Just a month ago, in September, we successfully were able to hold another round of presidential elections, where my ministry, the Ministry of Interior, was the lead in providing security for the elections, where millions of Afghans, they came and exercised their constitutional right. So what I'm trying to tell you is that Afghanistan of 2019 is not Afghanistan of the 80s or Afghanistan of before 2000. In my lifetime, I have experienced so many isms. I remember Russian tanks parked in the street that I grew up like back to back. I remember the Civil War. I lived under the brutal regime of the Taliban. But we have come a long way. Just to put it in context, since a lot of young people are sitting here, over 50% of the Afghan population, the current population, are born after 2001. That means they are born in a democracy. They are experiencing constitutional order. They are enjoying soap operas. They are enjoying American Idol type shows. So they know the experience of democracy. The politicians and the warlords that have existed and they're still in Afghanistan, now they're using over 100 TV channels that we have in the country as a medium to solve their differences. They don't come to the streets to fight like the way they used to do in the past. We have a vibrant civil society that is engaging and debating the challenges that we are faced in the country. But at the same time, I don't want to paint a rosy picture and say that, oh, everything is hunky-dory in Afghanistan and everything is fantastic. We are fighting the Taliban, and along with them, over 20 international terrorist groups. Just yesterday, in the sidelines of the conference, I was discussing with a couple of colleagues and friends here that why is the international community still in Afghanistan, why there are some Czech troops, for instance, helping in Afghanistan. And my answer to them was that we are at the forefront of this conflict. We are fighting this war, and we are dying for it. So if we don't do it, if we don't do this fight there, we should fight it probably in the capitals of Europe. So it's a common fight that we are doing, and we give basically the ultimate sacrifice on a daily basis. But at the same time, you know, we are struggling, despite all the challenges, to make Afghanistan to move forward. The economy, for instance, we have created air corridors. Previously, a lot of the produce and the products that Afghanistan was producing, we didn't have markets for it. Now, you know, through air corridors that we have and through land transportations, even we send some of them to Europe. There's a young generation of Afghans who have come and took power, thanks to President Ghani for giving that opportunity to my generation to come lead. Just a few months back, there was a dinner that was at the presidential palace, and the president was there, the national security advisor was there, and I was seated actually next to the Pakistani ambassador. And I asked one simple question from the ambassador. I was like, Mr. Ambassador, with the exception of the president, do you see anyone around this dinner table, including the NSA, over 40? He said no. Like the Taliban, the government per se, they're scared of this generation who are clean, who are committed to advancing and reforming Pakistan. And I don't know why they're cutting my mic off there. So that they are committed to advancing and moving Afghanistan forward. We do not want to experience the dark days and the dark ages that we have experienced. We continue to struggle in the country. But at the same time, like I said, we are moving forward. You know, my generation, we are employing policies and planning documents that are tackling the issue of extremism at its root. In my view, fighting extremism, it's a battle of ideas. It's about narrative. And there are two narratives. You know, one narrative that my generation and we believe, it's a narrative of constitutional order, humanism, democracy, civic values. And it's another narrative that is presented by the extremist groups that is based on terror and maim and things along those lines. And I think for that narrative, our work, in my view, begins in kindergartens to work on the next generation, that they're exposed to the topics and the values that we believe on. And then you go to primary school, middle school, high school, and universities to embed these values and these ideas and their thoughts and their minds of what is basically right to be on the side for. So I've been given a signal that I have about 1 minute left, and with that 1 minute, I'll leave you with another short story. So before moving fully to Kabul, I was residing in the United States, and every time I would go home, I would ask my nieces and nephews, I have, God bless them, 13 of them, that, what do you need, what can I bring you? I remember one story, like my 4.5-year-old Sohrab at the time, and he asked me that, uncle, can you please bring me an iPad? And for me, it was mind-boggling, because maybe until I was 17 or 18 in Afghanistan, I didn't know what a computer is. But now a 4.5-year-old there, they know iPads and connections and internet. So that is basically the generation, the young generation of Afghans that is giving me hope, and that they are not alone, and that they are connected with all of you. Probably some of you are friends with them on social media and the rest. And with that, 23 seconds left, and I will give that to my colleague from Zimbabwe. And I thank you all for your attention. Thank you.
So, Hamid, thank you very much for your personal point of view to the topic Quo Vadis, Afghanistan. Yes, that's the problem with children. My daughter also wants things like that, which are quite expensive gifts. So, last but not least, we go now to Zimbabwe. I would like to welcome Gladys Changa-Shirere. She is the director of the Institute for Young Women Development and the founding coordinator of the African Women Leaders Forum. Gladys is a member of the steering committee of the World Movement for Democracy, as well as an activist. That's why you're here. And she is also a recipient of the Democracy Award that is called 30 Under 30. And that's for her, from the National Endowment for Democracy, for her pioneering work on young women's political participation in Zimbabwe. Gladys has a Master in International Relations from the University of Birmingham and a Master's in Public Policy and Governance from Africa University. So please, Gladys, now your topic, Zimbabwe after Mugabe. The floor is yours. Thank you.
So I come from a country that dominates world debates around politics, dictatorships versus democracy. And when I was invited to make this presentation, I asked myself what I was going to talk about. And for a second, I told myself that I'm an activist, which means I carry a lot of hope, I carry a lot of energy to change things. So I decided to tell a story of hope. So November 2017 in Zimbabwe, a new era dawned upon our country. I was 7 months pregnant with my second baby. That whole month, a lot of things were happening, you know, within our ruling party and the government. The current president, the late Robert Gabriel Mugabe, may his soul rest in peace, was instigating having his wife to take over from him. I was so angry, and I knew I shared this anger with other activists. One of these days, I was just driving to work, and I stopped by at a place that was owned by the first family. It's a farming area, and there are people who sell, their stuff there, and I was just so angry that the child that I'm carrying, is he or she going to have the life that these people I'm seeing by the roadside are having on a daily basis? Is the child that I'm going to give birth to going to live under the same leadership, in the same mess that I've lived for more than 30 years? So I stopped by, and I started talking to the people who were by the roadside, and I shared my anger and my frustrations with them. And they said, so what do you think we should do? And then I said, I think we should get into the streets. You should just leave your ways there, and let's do this together. I have a lot of women I'm working with, and they're willing to do it with more people like you. But little did I know that by the time I returned back from work, the situation would have changed. So a coup was in the making. I received phone calls from my friends telling me, to be very careful because army tankers have taken over in the streets and so forth and so forth. And very quickly we heard the president was under house arrest. And things happened so fast. The president resigned on the 18th of November. Before he resigned, people were called to go and demonstrate against him because the coup makers really wanted to make this a democratic coup. So a lot of the women that I work with called and said, what should we do? Should we go and protest together with these people? Or we should just, sit in the backgrounds? And for me, I was so scared because I strongly wanted Mugabe to go, because I really felt that it was an era for a new leadership, for a new dispensation in Zimbabwe. But again, I was very indifferent as to how should he go. We've been having elections, he wasn't going. We've been protesting, he wasn't going. And here there is a coup, and Mugabe was bound to go. But I was so scared of the precedents of participating in a coup and what that was going to do to the transition of democracy. So I told the people that, you know what, if you really feel like you want to get into the streets, go ahead and protest, but I will be celebrating for his departure from home. So fast forward, he then resigned, and on the 24th of August, we had a new president. And I was so happy I was going to have a child who was going to be born outside Mugabe era. And as that happened, he was inaugurated. We went into an election in July, and the election was celebrated by many, especially in Africa. Although it received a lot of international condemnation, we really felt that it was an election with a difference. There wasn't as much of overt violence as we have seen in the past. And we were quite hopeful. We thought that this guy who had taken over, Emerson Dambudzo Mnangagwa, was going to change things. But yes, he did change things, only for the West. So we had an election on the 30th of July, and there was a dispute on the presidential results, and people got into the streets to protest and say, we want the actual result, we don't want a rigged result. And then what does the new guy do? So on the 1st of August, as people are protesting, he releases the army into the streets. The army started shooting the very people that had supported them when they were on the streets. And 6 people died. Many others were injured. Some started running away from home because now they were targeted. And that's how the new president took over from the former RG Mugabe, to try and perfect a dictatorship that Mugabe had left. Fast forward, things started to deteriorate economically, politically. Human rights defenders are arrested. We are abducted. We're receiving phone call threats to stop the work that we are doing, and so forth and so on. And again, in January, another protest broke out. And yeah, people were killed again. And this time, more were killed. Around 22 people were killed. Many others were arrested. And from the estimate of 300 who were arrested, 20 were young women that I knew that I've worked with. And these women have been taken from their communities. And 17 women were raped by the soldiers who went out to kill the people. It was a very painful moment for me as an activist, but also for the movement that I lead and the generality of Zimbabwean civil society. And we asked ourselves, what is it that we can do? We couldn't lose hope. We had to keep fighting. Fast forward, August 2018, civil society tried to organize additional protests, and so is the opposition movement. And these protests were stopped by the police. They said that we have banned protest for now for fear of national security crisis. And the security crisis is coming from the increasing tensions on the ground. So people really want to protest and get this government to recognize the things that we're going through. So the protests are banned, and some of my comrades go to a human rights workshop here in Eastern Europe, and as they come back, 7 of them got arrested, charged of subversion, of trying, to overthrow a constitutionally elected government. And so this is the life we're living in the Zimbabwe after Mugabe. But the question then for me was, as I thought about telling this story, what is it that I want to take out of this space back home so that I will not go on and add on the stress, on the anger, on the frustrations that the people of Zimbabwe have. So that I will not go back to my son, who is now 20 months old, yes, born after a Mugabe era, but still living under the same conditions, if not actually worse than what we went through during Mugabe era. So I decided to tell this story to say, for me as an activist and the human rights defenders that I work with, we have made a decision to say, yes, we are being closed out, we are receiving phone call threats, our fellow comrades are being abducted, some are actually being killed, but we should not lose hope. So on the 25th of September, just last month, we organized to go and meet the UN Special Rapporteur on the freedoms of assembly and association. We had made a visit to Zimbabwe. And we detailed the experiences that we are going through, these things that I'm sharing with you. And I should say I'm very impressed with the report that he produced. A very honest, brave report that he has presented to the government of Zimbabwe as concerns that are coming from us as human rights activists, but also from the generality of Zimbabweans. And secondly, me and my colleagues, we have also decided to rethink our model of organizing to say we need to strengthen our coordination. We're coming up with an initiative of the Alliance of Community-Based Organizations, where we're working with various community leaders in different communities so that we come up with a collective approach of how we're going to tackle the increased oppression in the country. And secondly, through the African Women Leaders Forum that I've initiated, I've started reaching out to some of the sisters in the SADC region, the Greater African Union, and also it's an initiative that I'm taking here to the forum to also appeal to you to say, SADC has deserted us, the Zimbabwean government has deserted us. We only have you as the international community to stand with us. And just like the speaker who spoke last night said, without international solidarity, we will perish. You managed to do it for Azerbaijan. And I ask today that if it's not for the people of Zimbabwe and the children that we are giving birth to in Zimbabwe, then for who would you want to do it? I thank you.
So, Rushan, Hamid, we thank you very much for your personal testimonies. In this gallery format, no questions are foreseen, but is there anybody who needs absolutely to ask a question? Short? No? So, yes, there is somebody. Speak up, but very short, please, because we are late. No. Short question, and I will say it. One sentence, please. One short sentence, please. Yeah.
We get you.
My name is Armand Claes. I'm from Luxembourg. And that this...
I give you 10 seconds for your question. Please be short, because this is just...
Okay, I come all the way. You should know me. I want to strike briefly a different note. We hear about all these terrible things that are going on in various countries. But I want to say that not everything is right in our countries. Freedom, we are chipping away at freedom every day in all Western countries.
I'm sorry, what is your question, please?
Sweden are moving towards a semi-totalitarian.
Can I have your question, please?
That's my command.
I don't want to comment.
I'm not a junior man.
Do you please have a question to the three panelists?
You should know me. I'm an internationally famous intellectual scholar. And you should be proud to have me here.
In that case, thank you very much.
Yes.
And please do the comment on a different panel.
He has freed his country from ruthless white domination and exploitation. So for me, he's a hero. You may call him a dictator, but he did a lot for the black people.
So can we have the microphone, please? Thank you very much. And I would like to thank the three personal testimonies and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you very much.